Hi everyone, welcome along to Sonic Academy with me, Chris. We're back doing some interviews, and today I'm joined by a producer who's released on some of the world's coolest labels, including Dirty Bird, This Ain't Bristol, Cr2, Perfect Driver and Wartone Records. He was once part of the UK house act The Squatters, but now out on his own. Would you please welcome to Sonic Academy the one, the only, Oliver Portamento, the man behind GAWP. Hi Oliver, you there?
How you doing, Chris?
I'm good. Thank you very much for joining us on Sonic Academy today. I wanted to catch up with you, have a chat with you about your new work. You've kind of left the Squatters behind and moved on to this new act called GAWP. Can you tell us a little bit about GAWP?
Yeah, GAWP started up about 3 years ago, I'd say, but it didn't start properly until about 2 years ago. It came about when I was one day when I was in the duo before with Alex. He couldn't make it to the studio, so I thought I'll have a play around, make something that I want to make from my heart that's a bit experimental and a bit weird. So I made this track, and then I played it to another one of my friends and said, "Look, I've made this. It's a bit out there. What do you think?" And he just turned around and went, and he just opened his mouth. And I said, "What are you gawping at?" And he said, "Oh." He said, "What's gawping?" And I said, "GAWP." And he said, "What does that mean?" And that's where the name came from, the first track. So
that's brilliant. Yeah. So you're trying to say that Alex held you back? Is that what you're saying here?
No, he didn't hold me back. It was just one of those. He couldn't make it that night, so I was just
I'm only joking. You kind of been through the successful act thing with Squatters. So how did you approach this differently? What has changed?
I think the biggest thing for this project compared to the last was before we didn't mean to have success. We just wanted to write music, and we wrote some music and it did well, and then we ended up flying, all over and playing, and then it became like almost like it set a bar for a business level. So then we had all the outgoings, we had all the things that were the stresses, the pressures, the management and everything else, just to sort of please everyone, pay everyone, all that sort of thing. And then the fun came away from it, which we originally started. So for the Squatters, it was quite difficult because we got into like all that when all we wanted to do was make music. We didn't want to do all the rest of it. But so this time around, it was all about the music, and that's where it's all my music's come from the heart, really.
Did you have to take a break from the producing? Was it after the Squatters and all that pressure? Was it like I need to get away, and then you missed it and came back, or has this been a continuation?
Yeah, there was a bit of a break. I think it was what I'd like to say a no man's land, because I took a year out, really. I didn't do that much work because I used to run club nights and DJ all over and do that. But then I decided to take a year out to concentrate on building a studio and making some music. So that was the primary goal. My parents were away for a year, so I built a studio in their house actually. But I had a bit of downtime to think, and to be honest, I'd got a bit lost. We got a bit lost with the sounds because it was we went from sort of house, we went from the electro, the house, the sort of big room sounds, and then it sort of like started changing it, and the scenes changed. Dubstep came in, and it all changed really. So it was good to have a bit of downtime before this new project.
And did you feel refreshed after the project? Did you know what you were wanting to do? Did you listen to loads of music and go, right, this is it? Or was it literally switch off, don't want to hear dance music, go away and listen to Mariah Carey, and then decide I want to come back to it?
Yeah, no, it wasn't really. I think if you're into music, it's inside you. It never leaves you. It doesn't matter what age you are, or you might get fed up with the scene or the sounds, but inside you still love music. And for me, it was, I didn't really mean to get into another project, to be honest. It just happened. It evolved. You sort of sit down one night in the studio and think, I'm just going to try this, write that, and then next thing you know, it's like, oh, why did I make an EP? Or it's like, why did I do this? And then next thing you know, you sort of you're doing it nearly full time. So
and what's it like second time round? Is it different? Is it more enjoyable, or is it? I think we talked a couple of days ago about this project. You're very much saying no rather than yes.
Well, they both have the pros and cons, really. Everything from just travelling alone. That's very different.
Yeah.
Having to drive. Yeah, things like that. But also making music as well. It's very different, especially because we did squats for sort of 8 to 10 years. We did a lot of years, and when you're used to having that person next to you, thinking you can always turn on and go, "What do you think of that?" or "What do you think of this?" But when you're on your own, it's very different. You have to make that decision yourself. And if anyone knows me, I'm the worst person at making decisions ever. So
you needed somebody beside you to say yes or no to, and go, "This is what we're doing."
yeah.
What is Oliver? Is there a master plan with this, or is it literally let's go with the flow and see where it takes us?
Yeah, well, there has to be a master plan now, because before there wasn't. It wasn't, But to be honest, the whole ethos of the whole GAWP project I've set out to be is just to sort of enjoy it, and then the main thing is just to enjoy the making music, and enjoy the gigs, enjoy everything else, and that primarily is for me. It's not about the cash. It's not about this. It's okay, maybe the travelling is enticing. I'd love to travel a lot more and go to places and meet people. I love that side of it. But yeah, that's really the plan. The plan is just to release good music on good labels, inspire young people that are into it, and do that sort of thing, really.
So let's go and talk about the label you've released on. You've released on Dirty Bird, and you've released on This Ain't Bristol, two labels that are really well respected and doing similar sort of stuff. You've also released on Wartone and Perfect Driver. How do you reach out from the bedroom to get Claude Vonstroke to sign your tracks? What's the process there?
Right. Well, every label's different. Some labels go out searching for music, and they go and handpick young artists, or not even young, but up and coming artists that are, have got a bit of talent about them. And then there's other labels where they just get hammered so many promo demos and stuff like that. I think. Sorry, mate, I've gone off track.
That's okay.
What was the question again?
The question was, how do you go from your bedroom to making music in your bedroom and to getting onto Dirty Bird?
Right, yeah. So, well, for me, it was because I'd released records for a lot of years over a lot of different labels, and we never really had a direction. We never had favourite labels. We had ones we liked, which were Flavour of the Month, and then we go on to another. But for me, it was like making music inspired by the labels. So a lot of the music I made in the last 2 years, it's influenced from the labels I wanted to get signed to. And the problem I had with that was, if they didn't like it, it wouldn't really fit many other labels. That was one of the biggest problems. But I think it took me 2 years to get a track on Dirty Bird, and that was a goal for me. And every time I made a track, I was thinking, well, if they don't like this one, no one's going to want it, and this, that, the other. And you sort of doubt yourself. But you've just got to keep at it and make the best music you can and send it to the labels, really.
Because it was going to lead me on to the question. I was listening to Three Kings, which feels a little bit more like a straight up house record. And I was wondering, when you're making a track, do you go, this ain't Bristol track, this is a Dirty Bird track, this is something I'd like to get on Elro, or this is something I'd like Wartone to take?
Yeah, I think if you mentioned Three Kings, that's a collaboration I did with Jimbo, which is a good friend of mine. And I think, like anyone that does collaborations know, when you're in a studio together with someone, you both have your input, and sometimes you sort of meet in the middle, and that's more the tech sort of stuff that I've been making. But that's when, I probably made that like maybe a year ago, when I wasn't signed to the certain labels, and I was sort of experimenting with like different instead of just hammering the one sound, the one method of production. I was thinking, right, I maybe need to make this more sort of like playable, because some of the weird or twisted sounds, not everyone can play in the sets, or especially like some of the bigger crowds, they like a bit more of a rhythm, or they want more energy and stuff like that. So it's almost like it's refreshing as well, because you can make a different style. So
definitely, I mean, the stuff that the Clown Bite EP and stuff, there's a very LA sound to it. How do you go about understanding that sound and really getting the essence of it?
I think it's hard to describe, because what I like, what I produce, or what other producers inspire me, their sounds. It's almost like, as a producer, I try and think, how have they made that? How is that? It's not predictable. It's not like Lego. It's not just thrown together, and it's not the methods, the processing. Everything's very different.
Mm.
So I think you hear that in the sound, the production, the way of the production, rather than what the sounds are. If that makes sense.
I mean, when I listen to the Clownbite EP, it feels like an American producer. It feels like it's almost got roots in hip hop and stuff, rather than being from the north of England. It very much feels uber cool and street, and as you say, it's the way it's produced, it's the way it's processed, and the effects and stuff that are used on it. It's slightly different than you can hear then on things like Three Kings. Feels like a UK record. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, because the sound that I make when I produce on my own is totally different to when I produce with other people, and especially a lot of the GAWP original stuff. If you listen to it, it's using like really sort of SP1200 samples and some really sort of rough hip hop stuff, and with the snares and all the percussion is a bit more. It's not as rounded. It's not as clean, or it's got it's maybe got triangles in instead of like a fast ride and stuff like that. So that's where the hip hop probably comes from.
Well, let's get on to that, because I want to talk to you about things like Witch Doctor. The bass is definitely an LA sort of bass going on there. It's a really tight, rounded, solid bottom bass. Can you remember what made the bass? Is it a sample, or is it from a synth?
Yeah, it was from a Moog Voyager.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, I just used it. It's behind me here somewhere there.
Oh yeah.
That thing. So yeah, it was out of that. That's my sort of go-to synth. I think if I ever, when I die, I think that'll be the only thing coming with me. So that's like one of my favourite ones. So.
You're not going to put it in the coffin with you, are you?
Well, I could have it like rack mounted on the top or something.
Get it plugged in so people can visit your grave and play a few tunes. So it'd be good. Yeah. What other stuff? You've got, looks like you've got a really lovely studio sitting there with some nice outboards. What other key bits of equipment do you have there that you could take us through?
Well, I use for the outboard stuff. I use SSL X-Desk mixer, which I do my summing out my UAD.
Yeah.
And then I've got the SSL bus compressor, which I use on most of my tracks just to glue the mix together. A lot of the other stuff, it's all drum machines and synths, which is I've got the Access Virus, the one that everyone used to have, and then the original 808 909.
Have they got nice covers on them?
Yeah, they've got the Deck Saver.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I don't work for Deck Saver. It's not I'm not getting paid to say that. But yeah, and then the Prophet 6, which is like one of my favourite synths, the Dave Smith. But the only problem is, you've got to be able to play it properly, and I can't play it properly. You've got to be able to, it's like all hands on synth, but I'm not that good on the synths, to be honest.
When you say you've got to play it properly, I mean you've got to express it through modulation and turning knobs as you're playing it to really get it to sing, or it's not very programmable. Is that it?
Yeah. No, you've got to be able to play chords.
Oh, okay.
And play the keys really well.
Right.
So, I just program it in, and I just if you saw how it works, you'd understand why I don't really play the keys.
So let's go back. What DAW do you use? What's the DAW of choice?
It's Logic Pro X at the moment.
Right.
So
and how are you finding Logic at the moment?
I've used it for years, and I find the audio engine's really good on it. I'm not saying the others aren't, but I've just Alex converted me years ago to from Ableton into Logic, and then but now he's gone back to Ableton. I stayed on Logic. Okay. But it's just it's just some of the plugins that the built-in Logic ones I really like. So, and the sound I get as well. So.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a roundedness to Logic that I don't know whether you get in other DAWs, but people can argue this all day. So let's go back to drums, because it's very important in your tracks. It's the total foundation of everything you do. With Logic, are you grabbing audio samples, dropping them in the timeline? Are you programming an ultra beat, or what way are you getting grooves? Are you getting loops in, chopping them up? How's the drums made?
All sorts, really. I use I use everything from chopping up loops. So I sometimes like to get loops and get the strange sounds out of them. So there might be a tail on something, or there might be a sound that you wouldn't really hear in a drum kit, that, like you say, out of a hip hop sort of thing. It'd be like even a breath or an old sample, and I'll do that. But my kicks, I'll use things like the Sonic Academy Cr2. I might use battery and put preload samples in that. I might get samples from my sort of. I like to get a lot of samples from older stuff, not so much always newer stuff. To give it that older sound, and then crunch it. And sometimes, I'll be honest with you, I've got lots of drum machines, but I don't really use them. Okay. I sampled them like once or twice, and then after a while I got so fed up of using the ones I'd sampled. They didn't inspire me anymore. Yeah. So I was just like, do you know what? They just look pretty.
so when you're saying old samples, are you getting old records and sampling bits of those, or how are you finding old samples? Where are you getting these hip hop samples and stuff from?
Just through things like there's a lot of packs. I try not to use the same. I try and mix all different sorts of packs together, and I'll as well. I'll layer stuff, so I might get a hi-hat which is really clean, and then I'll just process it. I do a lot of processing. So if you listen to my tracks, there's a lot of processing in there, and that's what it's all about, the effects and the processing, because there won't be big chord changes and key progressions. It'll all be to do with like getting the dynamics and making them sound twisted and weird and stuff like that. So.
And that's when you're bringing in snares. Are you layering them in EXS24 or on the timeline on your range page, or how you how do you build the drums? Is there one key product that builds the drums?
Well, what I do is in Logic, I always use a stack track. So yeah. I'll maybe have 16, but what I do is I'll process them out to the SSL and send them all there, and then so in there I might have. No, I might have a bank of claps which are in sort of battery or in machine, like that sort of thing, and then my kicks might not be in that, and they might just be straight out the door. So you get a different sort of sound and a different feel. But every time it's almost experimental. I don't really have a set thing where I go to every time, because I find if I do the same thing every time, I lose interest quite easily. So.
And what about processing drums then? What is there a key plugin that you use? Is it UAD? Would you use the Dormer or something? Something with the fast attack, or what compressors and stuff would you slap over? Is it an SSL G channel or something?
Yeah, I think the best way to describe it is that UAD is my. I use Logic's plugins to sort of shape it, but to actually process it, I use in the UAD. I use the Teletronics LA. I use the Vertigo, and also the. It just depends what sound I'm going for, because if it's a cleaner sound, and if it's a more straight up tech house sort of thing, I won't try and crush the drums. I won't try and make them sound like they're out in a rubbish knocky speaker, so to speak. I'll make them like cleaner, so I'll probably just EQ them a bit more rather than sort of trashing them. But a lot of things is all UAD now.
It's an expensive habit to have, isn't it?
And not really, because if you get the couple of plugins that you use forever, that's fine.
That's right. Yeah, there's quite a lot you don't use. There is a lot of, I can't remember the track now. I think it was on Climb Bounce, maybe Working Girl. lots of sort of spot effects happening in the background and filling out space. How do you make the spot effects? Are they samples? Are you mangling stuff? Are you just grabbing stuff off records, or what way does that work?
Yeah, there's recently I've been recording my own voice in, preferably when I've got a cold, so I sound different. So I've recorded some of my own voice in. I've got some samples out of like news interviews and crazy things like game shows and all sorts of just taking audio that has a bit of a strange tone to it, or something that's not sort of audible, where you go, oh, that's that, or that's that. And then what I'll do is I'll just mess around with them with plugins and effects. I think one thing I do use is the delay designer in Logic.
Right, okay.
People always say to me, how do you do that?
Yeah.
I'm like, so yeah, check out the delay designer in Logic. That's a good sort of tool. I use some of the Sound Toys stuff, that Sound Toys bundle, and there's many things. There's so many things to go to, really.
Because there's like a vocal sample in Working Girls, it just sort of stops in the middle of the track, and this male vocal sort of spoken word thing comes in. Where does that come from?
I can't remember which one you mean.
No.
I'd rather say that than just make something up.
Just make something up. So, keyboard wise, so it's you've built your drums, you're track stacking them, you're compressing them. You've said, do you put stuff through? Have you got an SPL? You said earlier on about an SPL. You want that sort of crunchy 12-bit thing. Is that going on?
Oh, the SP1200. No, I use in Machine. You've got where you can change your sample rate, so it goes to the SP1200 mode. So it makes everything sound really sort of lo-fi and crunchy. But it also does it in battery as well, where your vintage compression settings are and stuff like that. So yeah, so I do that, but that's I don't really have an SP1200. Okay. Like,
the other thing I wanted to talk to you about was one thing I was always guilty of was kitchen sink and throwing so much stuff in, going, oh, it has to be fuller, it has to be fatter. How do you not do that? This was probably my question. How do you know, right, that's enough and it's quite sparse? How do you know not to throw any more at it?
Well, I like stuff really stripped back and raw. So as far you can have a kick drum and a clap and a bass, and that's it. I'm done. So for me, but also to fill the range, you would have to have more in it. But it's for me, I like quite raw stuff. I like raw music. Whereas, like, I listen to a lot of tracks and there's a lot going on, and I just think to myself, if I was to make that, I wouldn't have half that in. But yeah, I appreciate it because I think, they've done really well at throwing so much sound in, But I think it's one of those things coming from before, when we did the sort of electro house and the sort of ravey sounds and everything. Coming from that, it was so noisy and so cluttered.
Yeah.
And and I think just stripped back is just a lot. As well, I'm mature now, so the BPM's gone down and there's less noise. So, but I always find as well, the style I'm doing is pretty much it's a bit like hip hop production, where there's a lot of gaps in it. So unlike sort of drum and bass and stuff like that, where it's fast, there's so much going on, and it's there's quite a lot of gaps because there's a lot of sub, there's a lot of kit, there's the 124 BPM. It's a bit different to anything sort of high BPM.
I find it incredibly clever music to. Sorry, I've lost my camera. I find it incredibly clever music to be made because it it is so sparse, and it's very brave to do that. The other thing I want to talk, what would be your least favorite thing in production?
My least favorite thing in production.
Yeah, to do what do you go? Oh God, I can't be bothered arranging, or I hate doing this bit, or I hate programming drums, or coming up with bass lines, or what's the weak area?
Normally, it's what I really hate is when I finish the track and I send it to a label, and then they'll say, "Yeah, great. Can we have all the parts, please? Can you send us all the remix parts and the stems and this, that, the other?" And then I'm just like, oh, and then I've got to then go back, which I've mixed through the desk, and I've got it to sound like I wanted it to sound, and I've got to try and figure out how I've bussed everything, how it's all wired, how everything works, just to get out the elements I need. You know, that's what I hate. I hate having to sort of like, you know, or say if someone said, oh, you know, we'll do a stem mix down. I need all the stems and parts and the effects, and I need it all bussing and everything. The channeling I've got. I just, you know, once I've got like 70 or 80 tracks, believe it or not, when you listen to my music, some of it sounds like 5 tracks, but you know, it's layered and layered, and then one will be panned, or there's a lot of things going on, and a lot of different levels.
So would you be quite disorganized when producing, when getting stuff together?
I'm pretty organized if I was set to be, but when I'm doing the creative side, I just go for it, and I'm just like, you know, it's a bit like sort of rewiring the studio sometimes. you just like plug this in, try that, do this, do that. Oh, just leave that for a minute. I'm going over here. I'm going to play on this synth, and oh, they're going to do this, and then next thing you know, you've got all these channels, all these plugins, you've got all these things going on, and then you might move your MIDI up and be like, whoa, hang on a minute. It's a lot of it, you know. A lot of it, I'm going to be honest, is experimental as well. So you do.
Totally, but I think you need that in that sound. Sorry, my camera's just gone off here. I'm just going to quickly refocus, try and get it as best I can. There we go. We're all back at it. The camera just went down, and I'm having an error. So, I suppose the other part. I know you've got the label, or you've got the records going. You've got lots of stuff coming out in very cool labels. You've been, you know, already pretty prolific on 2017. What about live work? Are you going to get back at the DJing and take this on tour?
Yeah, I'm hoping to. I'm working on lots of options at the minute. But the thing I don't want to do is prematurely go live and go, right, we're going to do this, and then, you know, there has to be a genuine sort of you know, demand for it, and, you know, and I think the main thing is just keeping fun in the music, because that's, you know, that's primary thing for me at the moment. Just the music has to be right, and it has to be, you know, I've got to have time to do that. So
that's the main focus. What about 2018? Will we see you on the road? What's the sort of plans for productions? Is there more EPs booked in with other labels, or what would be the plan for the new year?
Yeah, I've got quite. It's really difficult, because in the interviews I've done in the past, you can sort of say, oh yeah, I've got this collaboration coming up with this guy, I've got this on that label, this, that, the other, and then they're all overhanging, so they're all sort of saying, you know, you could have a collab going with someone, but any producer knows you've started a collab with one of your friends or someone else, it's getting, you know, finishing it, and actually, until it's signed off, I won't say anything, because otherwise, you know, people will be like, oh, that's interesting, when's it coming out? And it's like, oh, we started that 2 years ago, you know. And we can't remember what it went like, and this, that, and that. But yeah, for 2018, I've got a lot of things sorted. I've got an agent. I've got all my visas are getting put in place for tours and things like that. So it's exciting times, but I just don't want to jinx anything by saying this, that, the other, you know, until it's there.
Okay, I kind of know where we talked off air about what's coming up in 2018, and I'm not going to say anything, but, you know, it's pretty big and pretty cool.
Yeah.
So listen, Oliver, I'd really want to thank you for joining us today on Sonic Academy. We are going to try and nail you down for maybe doing some content for us to for our viewers and subscribers to get an insight into your sound. Is that something we can talk about?
Yeah. By all means, it's. Yeah, I sound a lot better than I look anyway. So.
Well, I've got it on camera now, so you kind of have to do it. That's why I purposely did that.
We can keep up.
What a hateful person I am. and now I've got it on YouTube, and everybody can go, but GAWP said he was going to do a course for you. Listen, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I love the Clownbite EP. I love your sound. It's really original. It's very different, and it's so interesting as well. It's just outside of the norm. So thank you very much for joining us on Sonic Academy.
No, thanks for your time and your videotape.
Guys, I hope you all got something from that and enjoyed it, and I shall see you all very, very soon. Cheers. Thanks everybody for watching, commenting, and indeed liking. We really do appreciate all the support we get here on our Sonic Academy YouTube channel. So if you found this video super useful, please We'd love you to hit the subscribe button. We update the YouTube channel every week with new content, and if you want to watch some more relevant content, just click on the videos beside me.